I actually wanted to get into public service for quite some period of time, but we had 5 kids that we needed to get through school and get through college, and I wanted to be there as much as I could because being a trial lawyer is more than a full-time job all on its own, so trying to put public service on top of that would have been impossible, but once all the kids were through college and seeing that there was still a great need in public service, I decided to go ahead and run. Now, I'm now in my second term, initially elected to serve in November of 2022, and I served all during the 113th General Assembly and then was reelected November 5th by a margin of over 26 points to come back to represent the district and serve the constituents for another 2 years. I represent District 61. It comprises most of Brentwood out to about where the Governor's Club is on the eastern border, and then it goes all the way out west to Temple Hills, and then all the way back down into downtown Franklin. And so it's most of Brentwood and a good chunk of Franklin. My policies, frankly, are not very complicated. I'm focused entirely on the family because, in my view, as the family goes, so goes the community, so goes the state, so goes the country. And if we have a healthy family, which is essentially the cellular structure of our country, we're going to end up being, I think, where we want to be. And so when I look at legislation or proposed legislation, it's almost always with the view of how does this affect the family? Is this in the best interests of the family? Does this promote the interests of the family? And if it does, then I'll very likely be in support of it. Books are so important, and not just to children, but to all of us. And that actually is one of the reasons that one of the bills that I drafted and was able to pass in the 113th General Assembly was a bill that actually inaugurated official Tennessee state books. And we actually had 10 initial books. Well, fast forward to 2024, here in Williamson County, as in other counties, we have school administrators that are putting books that are either are obscene or not appropriate for the age level of children who have access to them in our school libraries, both in classroom libraries and in broader school libraries. And in 2023, a group of parents under what's called the Age Appropriate Materials Act of 2022 challenged 5 of those books. And unfortunately, the Williamson County School Board, not the current one, but the prior one, did not do its job. It failed to follow Tennessee law and determine whether those books were actually appropriate for the age and maturity levels of all students who would have access to them. So, on behalf of a group of about 6 parents, as an attorney, I brought an action against the school board and asked the court to require that the school board do its job. That's called a writ of mandamus. We asked the Chancery Court to issue a writ of mandamus to the school board that asked them to go back, look at the law, follow it, and determine whether or not the 5 books that were challenged should remain in the school system. Well, we were successful in that case. The parents won that case completely. And so just last week, the school board, which is a new school board after the recent elections, reviewed those 5 books and properly determined that none of them were appropriate for the age and maturity levels of all children who would come into contact with them. As a consequence of that, they removed 3 of those inappropriate or obscene books, and they restricted the other 2 books, one to just high school students, and then the 5th to either middle school or high school students. So parents, fortunately, at the end of the day, are now being heard in Williamson County, and the law is being vindicated. So as happy as we are that the school board followed the law last week, there is much, much work to be done because there are many more books in the school system libraries that are not appropriate, that need to be removed, and it's incumbent now upon the school administrators to do their job. I know the school board is going to be keeping close watch over the next several years to make sure that the school administrators have books that are there to educate and inspire our students, not to degrade them or others. The priorities I have are those that I discussed throughout the campaign and really with constituents over the last several years. First, of course, is illegal immigration, which is something that has just gotten completely out of control during the Biden Harris administration. I've written one bill called the Trump Act of 2025, which is the Tennessee Reduction of Unlawful Migrant Placement Act of 2025, which effectively does four things. One, it defines the term resident, state resident, Tennessee resident in our code to include those who are U.S. citizens and aliens who are here lawfully. Second, it requires any state officials who are involved with providing benefits to Tennessee residents to ensure that every one of those residents is a lawful resident of the state of Tennessee and that they would use what's called the SAVE system from the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service to verify a recipient's lawful status before any Tennessee taxpayer-funded benefits are provided. Third, it requires that financial institutions verify the lawful citizenship of anyone who seeks to wire or send electronically any funds outside of the United States as a way of demagnetizing Tennessee from those who are here illegally. And then fourth and finally, it requires local and state law enforcement to report to the TBI quarterly on the lawful residential status of anyone who's arrested or incarcerated. And then the bill also requires the TBI to report that same information annually to the General Assembly so we can really get a very specific and accurate picture of how much crime we have in Tennessee that is the product of illegal immigration. So that's, you might say, the first priority. I also have filed a bill, House Bill 26, which seeks to protect unborn life. And we actually have got a really good pro-life statute in Tennessee, our trigger bill that went into effect right after the Dobbs decision in June of 2022. But strangely enough, the pro-abortion forces are finding ways around it. And there is a practice now of manufacturers, distributors, sellers, resellers of abortion pills, of sending those into Tennessee, even though that is a criminal violation of both federal and state law. The Unborn Protection Act of 2025 amends our wrongful death statute to provide the right for any member of the family of an unborn child who was killed with abortion pills being illegally sent into the state to bring an action, a wrongful death action, against whoever it was that sent those into the state with a strict liability finding and a damage award of $5 million, which we are hopeful will serve as a deterrent, an additional deterrent to folks not to violate our criminal laws. I've also, in that same vein, filed a resolution to amend our Tennessee Constitution to add Section 1 of the 14th Amendment from the U.S. Constitution directly into our state constitution, the portion of the 14th Amendment that says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be deprived equal protection of the laws. That's as far as the 14th Amendment goes. What the constitutional amendment does is it adds a definition of person. Under the proposed amendment, person is defined as a human being from fertilization through natural death. So we will actually enshrine in our state constitution protection for life, liberty, and property for the unborn the way it should be. I'm also working on a total rewrite of our firearms code because if you go to Title 39, Part 17, Chapter 13 of our Tennessee Code, we actually have a Tennessee code that is not yet compliant with the Second Amendment. And I think we all agree that our state code ought to be compliant with the Second Amendment. And over the years, we've had a patchwork of laws that have been passed. It's very difficult for anyone to follow exactly what the law is in Tennessee with regard to who can carry a firearm, what firearm they can carry, where they can carry it, and when they can carry it. And so what I'm in the process of doing is redrafting that entire code to make sure that it complies completely with the Second Amendment as interpreted by the Supreme Court's recent decisions. And those are I think, the highlights of some of the bills I'll be filing. With almost no exception, the bills that I filed are going to have broad support in our Republican caucus, both in the House and the Senate. And I have already had other representatives asked to be co sponsors on many of these bills, particularly bills that defend innocent unborn human life. That is something that is a core value and principle. But that's also the case with the Second Amendment. That's a core value. And then obviously, illegal immigration is something that I think that we're all united behind in terms of trying to counteract the harm that's been done to the community, to the state, and to the country by this lawlessness that we've seen under the Biden administration for the past 4 years. Well, fortunately, we have an office right here in the district, and I meet with constituents here all the time and have for several years. We also host town halls several times throughout the General Assembly sessions, and we'll continue to do that. Most folks reach us is actually by email. We love hearing from folks. We ask that folks be polite and respectful in their communications because we respond to every single communication that is polite, professional, and respectful. If constituents want to be engaged and do so in a respectful manner, we are delighted to engage with them. I mean, the only thing I really want folks to know is that we're there to serve them. And that means that we need to comply with our oath to uphold both the state and federal constitutions and look after their interests. And that's what I try to do every day that I'm on the job. And the more input that we have from constituents, the better.